Sonnenberg Gardens and Mansions State Historical Park is situated on the northern shore of Lake Canandaguia in the beautiful city of Canandaigua here in the Finger Lakes wine region. Today in the spotlight, the Executive Director and Director of Horticulture, Building and Grounds, David Hutchings, joins me. Welcome, David. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Great you could be here on a busy time of year.
Yes, it's still busy at the gardens. We're actually planting the Victorian rockery right now.
Oh, awesome. So, planting the rockery. That's great. Now, it's called Sonnenberg Gardens. If people want to follow along at home, how do they find the website? What's the...
Well, it's www.sonnenberg.org. Okay. And that's our website. It's very simple.
Okay, so was there a Mr. Sonnenberg?
No, actually Sonnenberg is the German word for sunny hill. It was the name of the farm that the Thompsons purchased in 1863 from the Hoberman family. And then they developed the estate as a working farm for many, many years. But Frederick was the first president of the First National Bank of New York, which today is Citibank, and he became wealthy. And he built this beautiful home and place for him and his wife. His wife actually grew up in Canandaigua, born in Naples, and her dad, though, was the Ontario County Sheriff. And so as the sheriff, he decided during the temperance movement to run to be governor. And he became governor of New York State in the early 1850s. And basically that's how they got to meet and their lives started to come together. They came back to Canandaigua in 1857 and got married right on Gibson Street. And then 5 years or 6 years later, they bought the wonderful Sonnenberg property. Oh my, and was this the original structure, or did they start with something simpler and build? They did start with something simpler. It was a farmhouse. A farmhouse? With 295 acres. And today, the 295 acres is the grounds of the Veterans Administration Hospital and the 54 acres of the estate. And so we've just acquired 3.5 acres that used to be an Army Reserve that we're hoping to build into a beautiful visitor center. Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah. Now, that house is something to see, isn't it? It really is. It's a beautiful building. It's Francis Allen was the architect. It's in the Brownstone Hall of Fame for the beautiful sandstone that's in the structure. So it's a limestone and brownstone structure. And beautiful architecture, 40 rooms. Wow. The family lived in 14 of them, and the rest of them were for servants or people who worked on the estate. And so it was only a place of entertainment, really, because the Thompsons had no children, but they had Mary had family in Canandaigua. And so this was really Mary's summer place to be able to come back to see friends and family. It doesn't get better than that. Yeah. Now, is it a Tudor mansion? Or? It is a Tudor mansion, yeah. It's very eclectic in that it was the Victorian era. But she has, you know, if you go in, she has a beautiful, great hall. There's a billiard room, there's a dining room, there's a drawing room, there's a library and a study on the first floor. And then all the bedrooms are on the second floor. And it's just my in-laws used to say, David, I could live in this house, you know what I'm saying? Because it really feels lived in. You know, you go to some of the bigger estates, you know. I have a good friend that runs Penfield State Historic Park down in Long Island. But the Coe estate, boy, that is so awesome in its grandeur, but I don't think I could ever live there, you know what I'm saying? I'd break everything, you know? Right. So, but the estate is just the home is a beautiful home, and we open it up every day for 6 months, and we have beautiful volunteers that come in and play the piano, really bringing the life into the building, and we have docents that are on first and second floor. But one of the nice things about Sonnenberg Gardens is that we do have tours. We have a daily tour, but you can just have a self-structured time there. And it's really a wonderful place to rest. We have these beautiful gardens. We have 9 gardens of the world. We have an arboretum of over 140 different species. We have greenhouses. that are used for study, but also for now native plant growing and our collection. We have a wine cellar, and we represent 43 of the local Finger Lakes wines and a couple of the wines in the Niagara region. And so it's quite a place to just go and rest. It's a peaceful day at Sonnenberg, we really encourage that, and we try to keep it somewhat free-flowing like that.
Isn't that great? So can you buy a membership?
You can buy a membership. Yeah, memberships are available at that website.
Okay.
They're $40, and the membership allows you to come every day of the year that we're open at for free admission, and there's discounts on most of our special events.
And how much of the year is the facility open?
From May 1st to October 31st.
Oh, okay, really most of the year.
Yeah, so 6 good months of the year. And we also have some shoulder season events each year.
I see.
This year we have a home tour in early December. We also have a Dickens Christmas in early December. In October, before we close, we have a Haunted Halloween and a Mansion Mystery series, which we have a beautiful theatrical troupe that comes in and performs.
Fantastic.
And it's really a fun night at the estate.
And are these annual events? Could people
They
look for these every year?
are annual events.
Oh,
Yeah. So
fantastic.
each year these events occur for the good of the organization. Just great little fundraisers.
And how does the season start in the spring typically?
The season usually starts with, we have a soft opening the week before, the weekend before May 1st.
I see.
And we do a orchid show and a spring wildflower walk.
Oh, wonderful.
And we have live music in the mansion. And we've had the Rochester Oratorical Society. Last year we had a beautiful jazz guitarist.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that space is wonderful to be in. It a lot of hardwood and fireplaces. The Victorians really liked their grand spaces, didn't they?
They really did. And one of the nice things is the house itself has, it's really was set up for summer. It has a porch for each room. It also has a fireplace and its own private restroom.
Oh, no kidding.
Which is really innovative, you think, from 1887 when the family started to live there.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, there was an aviary at one point, I understand.
Yes. Mrs. Thompson was known more for her bird sanctuary than she was for her gardens.
No kidding.
Yeah. Dr. William Hornaday from the Zoological Society of New York worked with Mrs. Thompson on building 5 different bird houses, so to speak. Today we have just the peafowl house and the flying cage foundation. But we just did an adaptive reuse of that space and built where the J house was a permanent tent site. And hopefully maybe we'll be able to build the building someday.
Oh, fantastic.
And so people can celebrate their lives there. And but it is on that end of the north end of the property where this beautiful bird sanctuary was. We have a wonderful volunteer in Barbara Stahl who wrote a book on the aviary, and she worked finding all the records and all the bird purchases and all the stories behind that whole bird sanctuary, which is quite a gift.
Because Mrs. Thompson was quite a world traveler, as I understand.
She was. Frederick passes away in 1899. And for the next 2 years of her life, she went to Europe with friends and family, kind of to figure out what her 3rd chapter or 4th chapter of her life was going to be. And she visited so many beautiful places. But she did take a trip on the Nile during that period of time, and very influential during those few years of what she then wanted to do with the Sonnenberg estate. So in 1903, the first garden was built by Ernest Bowich and Mrs. Thompson. Bowich was from Boston,
I see.
and so he was a landscape architect, and she did a sunken Italian garden with a French design, and she also gave $50,000 to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to find 14 statuaries to come to Sonnenberg. And so our fountains and our statuaries that are still there were from that first purchase of her first garden in
Fantastic.
1903.
Oh my, oh my.
Yeah, and so it took, and so her sunset years of her life, from her early 60s to her early 80s, she puts in these 9 historic gardens of the world and places that she had visited or she had wished to visit. So we know that she never went to the Orient. But in 1902, the World's Fair had a wonderful Oriental presentation, and she fell in love with the Japanese gardens. So in 1906, she builds the Japanese garden with 6 people that came from Japan, with the oversight of this man by the name of Kei Watamore from New York City. And the following year, she puts in a tea house. And it becomes the first residential Japanese garden in America.
Amazing.
Yeah.
In Canandaigua.
In Canandaigua.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we had a research student from the University of Japan, the Chibuya branch, Dr. Fuji and Lydia and Seiko Gato from Rutgers University did 3 weeks of study. And so we ended up learning all these details I just told you in 2012.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, the species that she put in, are they still represented today?
Yes, they are. Yeah. So we have one of our great collections is the Pinetum and the Japanese garden area, because it has 35 different varieties of conifers, and there's 88 trees in that collection.
Awesome.
And so that still exists. And so,
did she leave her plans, and did she leave her?
Yes,
like
she did.
Oh, no kidding.
So one of the great things that have helped Sonnenberg become more and more authentic, authentic in its stewardship, has been all of her records. She was an impeccable record keeper, or her staff was. And so we have probably our greatest piece of our archives is the paper records of how she put the place together from early 1900s until her passing.
Isn't that something? I imagine it'd be interesting to study those for climate reasons now.
Yes. There's some really neat cultivars that were used back then, though the climate has changed, and some of those cultivars no longer are available or no longer usable in the site. So one of the things, she used a lot of hybrid tea roses in her rose garden. And the hybrid tea roses are really heavy in black spot and all the fungal diseases.
Right.
Beautiful roses, but under our conditions, we've had to replace them with more floribunda roses. So we have reduced all of our chemical use in the care of 2,500 roses. But Mrs. Thompson had the rose garden not by species, but by color. So it was pink, red, and white, respectively, as it went through the garden arches. And the formality of it all is the shape of the gardens and the colors.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so the research continues in your greenhouses?
Yeah, our greenhouses are now fully occupied. So for the longest time, when I started in June of 2005. And we had 5 greenhouses with no glass in them, and we had, really a time of just restoring what was there. And so the first few years we did that, and we were putting glass in the houses, and now the houses are all fully glassed. Only half of them are really repaired.
I see.
But the half that's being repaired is now being used for native plant kingdoms that are, the New York State Parks actually last year said that they were going to hire 2 people from ESF out of Syracuse, and they were going to rebuild the native plant kingdoms in the state park systems.
Right, and tell us what ESF is now.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Environmental Science and Forestry School at Syracuse.
At Syracuse University, I see.
Yes. And so these 2 young people started the program, and they've been going out to different places, mostly starting with Canandaguia, and so that they could put back their grasslands and their waterways.
Right, that's the State Historic Park for the Seneca Nation, right?
Yes, so it's really our sister site about 10 miles away.
Right.
Yeah. So that, that Native American plant kingdom needed to be restored to that site. They have a brand new visitor center, and so in the restoration of its gardens, they've been out collecting seeds of native plants and sowing them at Sonnenberg. Also, for all the wetlands, taking things like red panicle dogwood and you know, doing propagation starts of the woody plant material. So it started there, but it's moved to Green Lake State Parks.
I see.
And now it's actually, there's a place in Saratoga, and they're looking about storing a fern crop in the Tug Hill Plateau area.
Oh, that's great.
And so they're really utilizing half of the greenhouse complex for that work, which again is an interesting story, but also gives a use to these greenhouses that were really utilitarian.
I see.
They were to grow crops for the farm.
I see.
And so today we have those, and then we have a beautiful conservatory that's been restored. Last year, within the last 2 years, we were able to put in 1,200 pieces of glass, restore all the metal and wood on that structure.
Oh my.
And most of that funding came from private donations.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my. If people wanted to support that, they could still donate to the greenhouse restoration then?
They can. We're right now trying to raise money for what was known as the vinery. So there was Mrs. Thompson had grapes growing, a Concord grape and a Catawba grape, and she actually grew them in the greenhouse and wired them to the ceiling. And so you walked in amongst a series of grapes.
Oh, isn't that great?
And we have one of those houses like that right now, because Hobart William Smith students and a professor at Finger Lakes Community College, they worked together to help me put those grapes back in.
It's really neat that Sonnenberg Gardens is part of a research and development network, really statewide, isn't it?
Yeah, we're trying. We really are trying. We're trying to make it, because we're founded in our charter, is all about being an educational entity.
I see.
And so being founded there, we really want to continue there.
It's so great that those greenhouses even exist after 100 years. Those
They
must
really
be
do.
historic.
They are, and that's one of the most valuable historic structures on the site.
Really?
The mansion of the historic house and those greenhouses are so unique. And the range of 9 greenhouses and all the propagation houses that were around there still exist.
Oh, that's great. And they came from Buffalo, right? It was a very famous company for greenhouses.
Yes. Yep. So they're they have all been you know, we've all been restoring them ever since I've got there.
Oh,
yeah.
that's fantastic. So what are the range of gardens? I've heard about the Japanese gardens and the Pinetum and the greenhouses. What other gardens are available for people to visit there?
Well, we have the 1905 old-fashioned garden, which is 1/4 mile of a boxwood hedge with, which is in a quinset hedge material, and inside of it's a 3-season perennial garden. Very similar to the gardens at Jefferson's estate at Monticello. Very formal, but what's different about our garden is it has this beautiful 3-season perennial within it. We also have the Italian garden, the rose garden, the rock garden, and the Victorian rockery is really also a wonderful garden. It's 5 acres, and it was kind of a wealth statement during the Victorian period, where they would build these naturalistic sites with waterways and grottos, and Mrs. Thompson, that was her last project in doing that. So that is being restored right now, and the waterways, we received a consolidated funding application award in 2017 for $900,000.
Awesome.
Which we have to raise a portion of that. And so we're down to the last $30,000 on that fundraising to do about $1 million project to bring the waterways back in. But I was just telling you as we were starting off, Stanley Smith Horticulture Trust out of California, San Francisco area, gave us $10,000 to replant 5 of the gardens within the rockery. And so we've been out planting and purchasing and planting what we grew in the greenhouses.
So if I'm planning a trip to Sonnenberg Gardens, is there a way for me to tell what's blooming right now on the facility, on the plant?
There is. On the website, we have a monthly bloom schedule. And so that kind of helps you pick when you might like to come. Probably our peak is in July. Because we have a lot of annual gardens that go in the month of May. But by the time they're established, it's usually early July. The rose garden is in full bloom usually the last week in June through the month of July. So it's usually about a 4-week happening. And so you really do want to catch that portion of the gardens. And then we have beautiful cut flower gardens at the entranceway where the cold frames were. We also have a kitchen garden where we're growing vegetables like Mrs. Thompson did for the Ontario County Orphanage.
She grew vegetables for others.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And so we have built a kitchen garden, and we actually feed the hungry in Canandaigua today, which are, we fuel the Gleaner's Kitchen.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then, again, the Lord and Burnham greenhouses that you were talking about, they have beautiful flowerings throughout the whole season within there because we have an orchid collection. So we have a real spring happening in the greenhouses because we have 3 orchid houses.
Fantastic.
And then a very tropical garden with some beautiful tropical plants. And then all the foundational gardens. Mrs. Thompson actually, around the conservatory, built some display gardens that showed off new cultivars of her day and time. So from 1907 to 1911, she tried all these neat cultivars in these 2 gardens. And when in 2005 or 6, one of my first years, I was an adjunct teacher at Finger Lakes Community College, and I did some garden design work with a class, and we actually designed those gardens with a coursework. So everybody got a chance to design those 2 gardens.
It's great that you build the education right into your programming.
And then I still use some of those designs. So,
well, now, if you have all of those climates inside the greenhouse, it had to be climate controlled. How did they do that 100 years ago?
Well, they actually, it isn't climate controlled with any automated system. And one of the unique pieces of the greenhouse is it's never been modified for the future.
Really?
Yeah, so we have all the metal cranks to open up the vents and side vents. And part of its authenticity is not to modify it. You know what I'm saying? And so we're continuing in that vein.
All right, they're quite rare, those greenhouses.
Yeah, well, Lord and Burnham really did a lot of greenhouse work between the 1880s to the 1920s.
I see.
And that was kind of a cycle where most of the grand greenhouses that are in America, you know, some of the first ones are in San Francisco at the Garden of Gardens, down in New York City at the New York Botanical Garden and the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. Those greenhouses really were some of the foundational ones that were before 1900. But Mrs. Thompson's is pretty early on. It was from 1903 to 1909 that range was put in.
A real golden era for this area.
Yes.
Canandaigua and Rochester and Finger Lakes.
And one of the great things about Mrs. Thompson, after her husband passes, she becomes such a philanthropic person to Canandaigua, but really to the whole Northeast. She founded a portion of Williams College in Massachusetts, Vassar College down in Poughkeepsie area. She also gave Clark Reservation land that's around Syracuse, very involved with the Native American Indians, and she got the Corn Planter Award. And then in Canandaigua, she built the hospital, the railroad station, redid the Canandaigua Hotel, gave us Kershaw Park, she called it the swimming school, and founded almost every church on Main Street, regardless of denomination.
Isn't that something?
And so she was absolutely an incredible person for our community, and we're so blessed to still have their home. And for me to be able to steward it is just a really great work.
And is the
I'm
Clark,
humbled.
yeah, is the Clark family still present in the area?
Most of them have passed that were real direct descendants. We had a wonderful surgeon in Syracuse, William Clark, who passed just two and a half years ago, and he was a very philanthropic to the organization. He'd probably given $1.5 million during his lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
And so...
It is resource intensive to keep these facilities operating.
And that is true. And so we have membership of about 600 people. We have, I think we looked at their volunteer roles. We have 254 volunteers this year. And so it really is a family affair in one sense, and a community within the community at Sonnenberg Gardens, and it's we're always trying to keep that well.
That's great. And so if I'm in the gardens and I'm feeling like a glass of wine, can I get that at the gardens too?
Yes, you can. So there's again a wine cellar, and which is open every day for about 6 to 7 hours of the midday of the year, midday of the day. So. Yeah, so it's just really a great place to spend a half a day and enjoy Canandaigua. The lake is beautiful, and it's a time to maybe hopefully leave Rochester for a few minutes and come down to the Finger Lakes and enjoy our beautiful estate.
That's a nice idea, and it sounds like a good place to have a wedding or a personal event or a private event.
Absolutely. We have a beautiful wedding facility now with the adaptive reuse of that aviary for our reception area. We have a beautiful wedding site, but we also allow people to get married wherever they like to.
Nice.
So we're actually building part of the Victorian Rockery for a wedding site. So it's kind of a cathedral in the Pines.
That's a lovely idea. That's a lovely idea. So a lot of artwork in the house itself, as I recall.
Yes, some that are mostly just period work, and also Sonnenberg, because of the family, took most of the things, and it also went through the Veterans Administration time. We have about 15% of the original items, but most of the rest are period antiques, which really give you a slice of the Victorian era.
Fantastic. Well, David Hutchings is the Executive Director and the Director of Horticulture and Building and Grounds at Sonnenberg Gardens and Mansion State Historic Park right here in Canandaigua, very near Rochester. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
And tell us the website one more time.
www.sonnenberg.org.
I hope a lot of people visit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.